Welcome to Horticulture, where a group of extension professionals and plant people talk about the business, production, and joy of planting seeds and helping them grow. Join us as we explore the culture of horticulture. Snow. That's what we're talking about today, everybody.
Raining out today.
Sorry. You only gave me 4 measures to come in, and then you stopped.
Yeah, we thought about a harmony to bring you all in, just tell you we're talking about snow.
You all know White Christmas.
Oh yeah.
I
do Let It Snow, Let It Snow carol in rounds. Remember, did you ever do that with the
they have like the 4 little I'm with you there. I've seen a cute corgi video that is similar to that.
You've
not
seen
to always bring up corgis
video on everything.
I feel like you would get along with a corgi pretty well. Have you ever considered getting one?
Or
you
two,
know what?
maybe.
If I'm gonna have one, I might as well have 2. That's my
Might as well.
So,
Why stop there? Maybe you should get another.
That is a lot
of hair.
If you had one
What is
more,
the
you could stack them
marginal-
all on top of each other, and they'd be the height of a real dog. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
They're
5
very
corgis,
long though. Yeah, so I guess
5
it would have
corgis
to
in
be
a trench coat, kind of
Yeah, that's what I was going for, Brett. Yeah,
kicking in.
kind of a stack, kind of a Lego corgi.
I get to see them this week, so I'm very excited.
You're gonna leave with hair all over you. But you know what loves snow? Corgis love snow. Snow and corgis actually do go together. They find it fascinating. And sometimes your plants can like snow. So did you all know that? Did you all know that
Snow's not all bad.
Yeah, it's
not all
not a bad thing.
Guess we'll call that a segue
you
into
know
our
what?
topic for today.
Yeah.
Yes. I literally started the episode with snow.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, the corgis were just the road.
The corgis were just
The
like
corgis was a
flying off
bonus.
left field.
Yeah, just a bonus. We never start off straight away.
Are you all snow fans?
Yes.
Yeah, to a point.
Yeah.
Yeah, to a point to where I'm not.
What does that mean? Like if you get more than a certain amount, or if it sticks around too long?
Well, I guess if it's a really snowy winter and I have to work outside. When I worked on the farm, I loved snow and cold, but I dreaded the mud. But now,
mud is not good.
I'd rather have snow and frozen conditions than mud. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't mind like when snow sticks around, which it rarely does in Kentucky, but the threat of snow now that I have like high tunnel structures is stressful because like there's always a chance that it's going to get too heavy and it's going to collapse something. And like I will never forget my very first winter with a high tunnel was the winter we got a lot of snow and we got a bad storm, and my husband and I were up every 2 hours all night long just to go scrape snow off. Looking back on that, probably didn't need to do it with the amount of snow we got, but I was stressed. So
Yeah. It made you feel better, right?
it made me feel better. But
away.
yeah, that was a long time. And then I told him, let's get another one. And he cursed my name. But
It's like a little dry. It's like a little dry run on having a baby.
yeah.
Every 2 hours. Yeah.
Constant
which is
maintenance,
why we don't have any, because we were like,
There
we
you
already have
go.
high tunnels. What do we need babies
You have
for?
snow. Forget this.
But yeah,
'Cause
I think snow. I like snow if it, when it sticks around. It's like that constant threat of snow that stresses me out. Like once it's here and things are, the roads are cleared off and your car's cleaned off, I'm chill. I'm cool.
I grew up in the foothills, and there's no prettier time than when snow starts to come around the mountains and everything kind of turns white and the trees kind of stand out. It's such a pretty time. I mean, in the valleys, and the valleys all fill up with snow a little deeper, and it's so cool. A good snow. I've
I
always
like how it
appreciated that.
hits up on the side of the trees and kind of like paints them, and
Yeah.
with livestock, like with cows, if you see snow on top of them, like that's a good thing. Like people think they're cold, but that means they like have
Insulation's working.
insulation. And so seeing the cows out there when they all have like little snow on them,
It's got
it's not
Angus, and
melting.
Angus
is what
are
you're
so
saying.
Not
pretty in the
melting,
snow.
yeah.
Yeah.
no heat loss. So yeah, if
Oh.
you see a bunch of like cattle and stuff out and they are like the snow is not sticking to them, they're having heat loss and need more feed to keep them warm and nice and toasty. So
Interesting.
Yeah.
Learning something new every day. Well, similar to cows, we like snow on our plants for a
Right.
couple different reasons. But the first one you already mentioned is insulation. And I know that surprised me when I first learned about it, that like snow on your plants actually insulates them. And I thought that was mind-boggling. But like when you really deep dive into it, It makes sense, right?
Well, like a fluffy snow, I've heard that compared to like a down jacket. There's air pockets in there, and it's got this crazy good insulating value, and it's so much warmer. The soil and your plant, if your plants are covered, we get the question sometimes. Well, if my small boxwoods or evergreen plants, arborvitae or whatever, if you have small plants, and people worry when we have a significant snow and it gets up over there. No, that's not going to hurt them. In fact, it's probably going to help insulate.
It's more like, I don't say dangerous, but harmful, right? When we get like these drastic cold swings and there's like no snow on the ground to insulate things, that we see more damage from those temperature changes. Versus if there is snow and stuff around them, probably not as much damage.
And plants, if there's no snow on the ground, and we have these, and we did have these conditions a couple of years ago. It got really, really cold, and not only was there a lots and lots of above ground damage, but a lot of root damage that we didn't see until the end of the following growing season. The plant just was unthrifty, not doing well. But roots are much more tender than above ground parts. We don't think about it that a whole lot.
Right.
Normally, roots are protected, by the ground. The temperature being buffered, but when the ground is bare, like Jessica said, and gets really, really cold, and it will, if it doesn't have an insulation, layer of mulch or snow or something like that, it'll tend to get a little bit colder, and that can damage roots. But it's those temperature fluctuations that's even worse.
Yeah, and cold. For reference, like if you're wondering, like, how cold, what is that difference here? There's like there was a Purdue article that the air temperature was -14. There was 9 inches of snow on the ground, which is a lot of snow. We usually don't get that much snow in Kentucky. Knock on wood.
I mean, we've had that much before.
We've had it. Yeah, it's
they're a little bit north of us.
Sort of like the 100-year flood that happens more than every 100 years, but whatever. So -14 air temperatures, 9 inches of snow. Your soil temperature was 28 degrees.
Huge difference.
-14 air, 28 degree soil. I don't know what the depth on that was. I'm sure it said, but I don't have that in front of me. But if it was just the first couple inches, then that 8 inches down, you might be above freezing at that point with how soil temperatures move throughout.
Once the top freezes, that insulates even further the soil below it, so even better.
But keeps those roots happy.
It's good stuff. Snow insulates. I mean, snow brings some problems with it also,
right?
And ice is a different discussion altogether. That's a different discussion. But we mentioned small plants getting covered by snow, and I don't worry about the smaller plants. But now if I have a big plant, I'll pick a notorious one like arborvitaes that are multi-stemmed evergreens, and those guys, they get a heavy snow load on those, and they will split if it's an extreme snow, very, very heavy, or either they're split or they'll kind of bow down and they may or may not come back up. If it's small enough, you can, some extension services have recommended, if you have a multi-leadered arborvitae, and I see people doing this, take a, material, something like maybe stockings or pantyhose or something like that that's soft, tie those up if a big snow event's coming, and try to keep those from going down altogether. But if they do go down, and I thought about this when I read
by
this.
By go down, you mean like they bow over,
when they
right?
bow down with a heavy snow load, if they go down and it's after the fact, you're trying to deal with the fallout. Don't go out there and aggressively shake those. The odds are that the wood may be frozen. You may be doing more damage than good.
Right.
In that case, I mean, you can't mention taking a broom and gently removing the snow load and letting those come back up on their own. Don't do a lot when the wood's frozen. Definitely don't go out there. And I've seen people do this, is just go to shaking them violently. That's probably not the best course of action to get the snow load off of plants. You can do further damage. So 2 different methods. You can kind of stay ahead of the curve a little bit by binding those multi-leadered plants like arborvitae to keep them from going down, or you can very gently, if it continues to snow, remove some of the snow load. Just don't be real violent about it.
Right. Another kind of negative thing that we see, if you have snow that lasts for a while, which Alexis mentioned, in Kentucky, we usually don't have that. Every once in a while, we'll get some of those stretches where we will have a snow that lasts like a week or so. But wildlife can suddenly, that is not normally an issue,
It's a
can become
huge
an
problem.
issue, right? Like
It is.
I think we have some apple trees we planted this past year, and fingers crossed we'll see how they come through since we had a big drought this past year. But once a lot of those critters like deer and rabbits and other things, most of their food sources are covered up by snow.
Yeah.
They move on to like some of our young tender
Well,
trees.
if it's apple trees, voles do an incredible amount of damage in a snowy year. And voles, sometimes called meadow mice, I hear people calling them meadow mice a lot here in my county. But oh my god! And you don't see any of that damage if it's a snowy winter. But they're active all winter. They continue having babies rapidly during the winter time. They're hidden from predators, and then voles will get under there. And unlike moles feed on things like grubs and earthworms. Voles feed on plant parts.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a young apple tree, they do a tremendous amount of damage to particularly young fruit trees and thin skin trees like that. But now, if it's a vole damage, well, like Jessica said, there's deer damage, rabbit damage, and then vole damage that I'm talking about. And you can tell the difference between all that pretty handily by the level in which it occurs. Deer damage is going to be higher up. Rabbit damage is up to 18, 20 inches. And then vole damage will be under the snow line typically because they're hiding from Jessica's falcons and predators, birds and owls and things. And that's why they get so bad. They're hidden from predators in snowy years. So their populations
they're quite happy.
They are very happy under the snow, well insulated under a snowy blanket. So yeah, critter damage, that's a great point, Jessica. It gets really bad in a snowy year, not only from larger animals like deers, but also voles with a V.
So if you have snow that's going to stick around for a while and you've got, some younger trees, go out and pull that snow back about a foot away from the trunk, because then there's that, open space where they're exposed to predators, and that will help keep them from girdling those younger trees and plants.
And there's some hardware cloth that with very small spacing, very fine spacing that you can wrap if you're a homeowner only with a tree or two. You can wrap the trees in that, but you do kind of have to get that wrap a little bit under the soil surface to make sure the voles don't get up under there. And it also protects against rabbits pretty well. But I've seen rabbit damage. They'll go all the way around a young like cherry tree or, apple tree, and just that tree is dead. There's no way it can come back from getting that cambium layer, destroyed.
Or you come out and your tree is half the size it was because the deer have come and nipped it. And you're like, well, I guess I've got some more dwarf fruit trees now. So
for all the benefits of snow, and there's a lot of benefits for snow, but the wildlife is not. Yeah.
Well, this is something we've talked about multiple times before. And I think it's just the nature of almost just any activity that we do, but certainly within agriculture and horticulture, is that there are drawbacks and advantages, because the same thing that you're talking about with the snow is the same thing. We mentioned this on our episode about mulch that you can go back and listen to. And I can tell you that the number of rodents that we have in our backyard is probably tenfold what most people who have just a straight grass, lawn have, because we have all kinds of cover and food sources for them. And so it's this, because we have a bunch of plants growing. And so, is the value of all that extra biomass and that the beautiful flowers and the food sources and the et cetera worth it as a trade-off? In the same way with the snow, leaving it there, in this case, you're talking about, as Alexis pointed out, small trees, but you want to set them off on a good start. But there is, and when you do something that's good for the plant roots, chances are an animal is going to be like, "Ooh, it's really nice in here. I love what you've done."
Oh my gosh, thank you so much.
So much in nature is selecting for one thing and against another thing. I mean, there's very little of that neutral ground. It's always for something and against something else, not in a negative way. It's just like Brett said, the decision is in the balance of things.
Have you all heard, and I'm throwing this out there and putting people on the spot, but like snow seeding for lawns?
Yeah.
Is that what I'm not a lawn person, so I've never fully.
That's you, Ray. You gotta.
It doesn't work well for lawns, and it all goes back to years and years ago. And it's a farm practice that is efficient and effective. It goes back to frost seeding clover in farms.
Okay, yeah.
And it's, freeze thaw cycle is a big deal, with plants and soil. As the ground freezes and thaws, it actually heaves quite a bit. In some plants, it can do a massive amount of damage to roots because it'll shear roots off. But during that freeze thaw cycle, the ground opens up, closes. And if you take a tiny seed like clover and you snow seed or frost seed, I guess I also hear it called frost seeding, that pulls those tiny little clover seeds into the soil. But if you compare the size of a clover seed to your typical lawn seed, like a tall fescue or turf top fescue, it's much, much huger. It's a longer seed, not a round seed.
Right.
It does not fall into those frost cracks. So you
monocot
will lose
versus dicot kind of thing.
Yeah, you'll lose the vast majority of your seeds. It doesn't help much at all with grass seed, but it does work with clover if it's well timed. So it's just a completely different scenario, but that was a kind of a straight line logic applied from a farm practice that's pretty effective. And
so it's more based on I've heard it called snow seeding, and I always thought it had something to do with like the melt and that you get, water and stuff like that. But you're saying it's more about the temperature fluctuation causing the soil to heave and thaw. And
it's you need an opening because seed to soil contact is everything, no matter what kind of seed you're talking about. You get that seed to soil contact with those openings from that freeze thaw cycle in the soil from clover. But
snow can help prevent heave thaw.
Right.
It actually guards against that. Yeah. Because it's better. It's interesting. It's better to get cold and stay cold than it is to get cold, get warm, get cold, get warm, because that's a very destructive cycle to these fine hair roots on plants, these little tiny roots that do so much uptake. Yeah.
Yeah. And even like buds, like above ground parts, we have those, we always say those times of year. And in Kentucky, it's usually like January, maybe beginning of February, where it's like 60 degrees for 4 days and the bees are out and everything's going and we're like, what is happening? And then it drops back down again. But I think a lot of our native species are more attuned to dealing with that, but you'll see a lot of things go out and bud and you're like, no, there's still 2 more months of
peaches. They all get, sometimes they're not so much. Forsythia can get wiped out because it's an early bloomer, but definitely peaches. If you get a couple years out of every 10, if you're a commercial producer, you're doing amazing. But it's one of those things. Ice is typically bad. It weighs a lot, but even a coating of ice on buds can provide a little bit of insulative value. It's a little bit more complicated than just insulation. It's the release of heat energy, but
which is wild.
Yeah, to think about its own
discussion.
Yeah, that could be a whole thing.
I feel like
with
we've
the citrus orchards, how they do that.
Just a reminder. People will purposely put ice on things to protect it from cold. Let your brain, if you're not, a physicist, wrap itself around that. It is mind-boggling.
I think they call that icy hot. That's
that's where that came from. Yeah,
that's
totally stolen.
I got a question. This is about this year, and it's a slight. It's related to what we're talking about. It's not about snow per se.
Sure, it is.
Have you all seen this year? So in the southeast of the United States, the east of the United States, we had a very long, prolonged, warm fall, November into even early December.
Yeah.
Have you all seen trees? Did you all see trees budding out? See things prematurely budding out, and
I had a red bud in bloom.
Yeah,
in like Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
it was wild.
We'll see that with these. I'd like to call them unusual weather patterns, but it seems like the unusual weather patterns are becoming the norm. In some
our
cases.
normal stuff.
The normal is all this change. But Brett, what I worried about with this kind of extended warm spells is I saw people putting things down like, maybe fertilizer is fine. If you're fertilizing your lawn, we recommend that in the fall, but that also means your plants are getting fertilized which is fine also,
Tender
unless you
growth.
do something like prune after the August the 1st or the first part of August. And then as a result of that pruning, that initiates new growth, which responds to those warmer temperatures. And you have a lot of tender shoots going into the wintertime. That means you're going to have a lot of dead shoots in the spring.
There's a house that I drive past down in our downtown area, and Alexis is a part of this community, so she'll have to look next time. It appears that all their boxwood hedges, they decided to prune late. So there's about an inch of growth or so, maybe 2, that is bright yellow.
Yeah.
On every
that
side,
color,
like where you could see where they are like almost white, right? Where they sheared it and that tender growth came up. And then winter, cold finally got here. And when it got here this year, it really
just melted
went from warm to very cold.
An example of not going by the calendar.
Right.
When it's the temperature and going by the actual like outside things, because like maybe they've been shearing those boxwoods, the week of Thanksgiving for 10 years now or longer, but because we were so prolonged in the heat here that it didn't matter. The plants don't care what day of the year it is. Like,
so they don't. In the past, maybe they were anticipating the plants going dormant
earlier.
Earlier, and so when you cut it, it doesn't respond with growth. But since it was so warm, it did. I just noticed things not dropping leaf or not even changing leaf until way late. Sometimes.
I noticed that, Brett, as well. Yeah,
and a bunch of my bonsai trees, like I very specifically didn't do anything to them, and some of them currently are sitting there with green pushing buds.
Wow.
I'm like, oh no, you're supposed to be sleeping.
Yeah.
Your cell walls.
I was very concerned about my red bud. I was like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And like sometimes you'll see it like in some cases where if you pull things in and you put it into a warm environment, like your house or something, or like a hot greenhouse, stuff will bud out and it'll have that reaction. But these have just been outside.
I noticed a lot of strangeness like that,
and I just put a tarp over them. But I was just curious.
I've noticed that
because for us, like the killing, like a killing hard frost was like a month later than usual. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it was a longer, and it was a pretty consistent warm spell, which, so much of the plant world is, weather dependent, day length and temperature, as far as hardening off and doing all of the mechanisms, getting ready for winter that plants go through, all the machinery not shutting down, but slowing down. It kind of concerns me when I see all that new growth, knowing at some point we're going to get that hard frost.
Well, I saw, and even, I mean, as far as some plants, I saw Sean Wright, who we've had on before down at the quicksand station. They had some, I think, blackberries that set fruit, flowered and set fruit.
Wow. We still had tomatoes, like cherry tomatoes and stuff, and a few like random, obviously peppers, because peppers will just keep going until like they really get that hard cold.
Yeah.
And peppers were still producing.
I think I saw
an agent. I want this to to be over, but I'll keep picking.
Right.
I saw just keeps going.
An agent friend whose garden is, has a big garden, but I think it kind of has a little bit of protection. Maybe it's around a creek or something like that, so that it gets a little bit warmer. But he picked a tomato December 16th for breakfast from the garden. And like I said, I think it's a little bit extra protection. My tomatoes died the beginning of December, but still, like, my tomatoes didn't die till the beginning of December.
Right.
No, Alexis, that's an Instagram tomato. Are you sure?
I don't know. Maybe
not.
That's
like
I heard people.
He might not to be trusted.
I've heard of people picking very late this year. They were picking really, really late this year. So
makes me wonder what if it's going to affect the insect populations at all.
Right.
That's so random. I just never know what the predictor for that is. I mean, we look at the duration and everything.
I've already seen insects active, like when we've had like some of these warmer days that you shouldn't be seeing, right?
Yeah.
But they're still out there and active.
Yeah.
So.
Well, sorry, I derailed us a little bit from the, one of the things about the snow is the moisture side of things, and I think
that's the good thing. That's a good thing, yeah.
Yeah, and it's multiple different ones, and I have to shoehorn bonsai into everything all the time. But one of the things that we talk about with like design considerations of trees is thinking about where they come from in the environment. And there's entire like species of trees that exist at really high altitudes where they get a lot of snow, and those trees are evolved to spend months of the year under snow load. Like the whole tree is completely under there. And one of the big ones is when that really dry air comes and blows through the mountains, it doesn't just dry the leaves out. Instead, they're underneath this big blanket. And sometimes you'll see if they have a lighter snow or the tree gets too tall and it's poking up out of the snow, the top will die. And so sometimes you will kind of mimic that in your styling or whatever.
Wow.
But so there's just a different angle on the moisture retention on the leaf side, but there's also at the soil level. You had shared some thoughts, Ray, about that.
As far as
just the notes you had about snow covering.
Yeah, that just goes back to the insulation and the value. And I love the angle that you took there, and I never thought about that. As far as evergreens growing at higher altitudes and the effect that has on, you're talking about the form of the plant, right? Like that leading to that natural, beautiful meandering shape that we see, sometimes more horizontal than vertical. Yeah,
exactly.
Central leaders
never thought about that. Yeah.
And in the case of taller trees, like a spruce, for instance, or some pines, this like really strongly downturned leaf pattern that when you look at it, it looks like almost like a Christmas tree, but then the leaves actually bent, or the branches bend downward. It's because that resinous wood is able to bend, not break. And sometimes they do break
sturdy.
Off, and it stretches downward, and that's entirely like this reflection of its relationship to the snow.
I find that farms that have like lots of trees are like, how can we deal with snow and like landscapes? And I'm like, well, first of all, it starts with selection. Some trees are inherently, have weaker branch angles. That if you're, planting, we call
looking at you, Bradford pear.
Looking at you, all of the ornamental pears. Like you don't want to select those. All pears naturally have an upright branching angle. But that's the number one thing is plant selection. Number two, as we've already mentioned, pruning is a well pruned, and larger trees don't need a lot of pruning if you do a good selection. But if you maintain like lower shrubs and things like that and pruned properly, that does help a whole lot. And proper pruning also means proper timing of the pruning. We've already talked about that. So proper pruning throughout the year.
Winter.
Yeah, do it when the plants are dormant. And that leads me to the next thought of, well, what do you do if you've had a lot of snow in the wintertime and you have some plants that have some ice damage? They've got some broken limbs and stuff. And Lexus just said it. You can go ahead and do some pruning once the weather fares up. And if it's, wintertime, late winter, it's generally, as long as the wood's not frozen, it's safe to go ahead and do some maintenance pruning. But you're not going to see the full extent of the damage until later that growing season. So you're doing really two prunings. One is at the time to correct obvious breakages. The second pruning will be months later, and boxwoods are a great example of that during that really cold snap that we referred to earlier in the podcast. You're not going to see that damage for months and months later. Those dead spots show up in some cases. So really a couple times you're going to be pruning there to kind of bring things back in line, recovering from, and that's for ice and heavy snow loads. But if you have some breakages, you will be doing some of that cleanup in your landscape.
So just to kind of summarize a little bit here, snow is a great insulator. So for example, when we shovel our sidewalks or shovel general areas on the fields around the structures, as long as we've not put any salt or something like that down,
that's
I can
another
throw that
discussion too. Yeah,
that's a whole other discussion. I'm talking fresh, clean snow. Putting that like on your landscape beds is not necessarily a bad thing because it's going to help insulate a little bit, but you don't have to. But just as an example, you can use that. So snow is a good thing. Don't panic. Try and tie up, any branches if you've got, especially evergreens.
Your plants
that
don't
are
want to
very
smother.
upright. If you know you're going to have a lot of snow or a lot of ice where there's going to be like a lot of weight put on those branches, kind of wrap those babies up so that snow can't catch as easily and pull those down. What else are we thinking about? Pruning, proper pruning. So don't prune in the fall. Unless you've got a big broken branch or something like that. That corrective pruning is always welcome any time of year. But in general, you don't want to cut anything back in the fall. You want to wait till late winter, and then you may go back in after things have leafed out and cut back more dieback. Especially if we've had a winter where desiccation is an issue, which means heavy winds, cold temps, no snow is usually when we start to see a lot of dieback. So just kind of focusing on those things really can get you through and make winter a great time for your plants, where they're soaking stuff up and rejuvenating themselves and enjoying the snow. And if you've got young trees, pull snow back away from the base, or do something that will help control any rabbits or voles that might enjoy the snow cover and girdle your young trees.
And that tree wrap has the benefit of protecting against frost cracking, which is another conversation, I know, but another common winter problem. So you get dual benefit from those tree wraps.
We've had an episode on...
We talked a little bit about tree wraps and its role in landscape protection for winter. Yeah, we have.
So look back.
One thing I would say too is, especially if you have older trees and you're concerned about them and you don't feel confident, or maybe you feel overly confident when you shouldn't, there's never any shame in calling a certified arborist to come and do some tree work for you. There's a bunch of compilations on YouTube of people dropping trees and branches onto their houses and cars, doing it themselves. And, you saved a couple $100 to then in turn put a $20,000 roof on your house. So just, the certified arborist can be your friend, and they can come and they can say, we think it needs it, we think it doesn't, but they're pros. And so
when it comes to insurance issues, if they come out and they look at it and they say you're good to go, or they do the maintenance that needs to be done on it, and then you still have what is called, quote unquote, an act of God happen, where you get an insane storm that comes through and blows a branch on. You have that as protection when your insurance company says, well, was this tree safe? You can say here, and they're certified, they are licensed. If you hire someone, pay the money to get somebody who's licensed, so that you do
licensed
have that
and fully insured.
Licensed and fully insured.
Look for that.
And they will be able to provide, and would be happy to provide, their license information for you. So if it's anywhere close to something that's important, make sure you hire somebody who knows what they're doing.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can do yourself, and I'm not trying to in any way push anyone away from that, but I think it is definitely, I know a lot about plants. I know a lot about trees, and I have had and will soon have again a professional come out and do some cutting, because I like my living room without a skylight at the moment. We're going to keep it that way.
Yeah, that is a big old tree in front of your yard. Your living room, it's like your whole house would go with the size of that thing.
Yeah. It's a Bradford pear. So
it's one of the few Bradford pears that has survived this long.
Yeah, it has I was really
not
good
gonna guess
genetics
that.
for branch angles, and it's just
I wonder if it's a true Bradford. There's a lot of ornamental pears, aristocrats and others, and I just wonder. Makes you wonder when one survived and done so well, huh?
Yeah. We're not going to push it any further, though. We're going to.
It's rolling the dice. It's a it's a pear. So
thank you for your service. We're going to put in a native. Thank you.
Yeah. And Lexus, just a plug for salt. There's a lot of good alternatives to salt. It is not your landscape's friend. Some situations we can't control. If you live next to a roadway or a highway, the worst salt damage you're ever going to get is going to be from blow-by from cars. It's a vaporized fine particle salt solution, goes on your plants. It will defoliate plants. I see it all the time. But if you're in control of your own landscape, there are a lot of alternatives to chloride-based de-icing agents. There is a CMA product, calcium magnesium acetate, that municipalities have been using forever. I'm starting to see that available for homeowners. It's less corrosive than tap water. CMA, look for that on the bag. It's a really good product, and it has almost none of the downsides of typical chloride-based de-icing agents. So, and it's much, much more friendly to landscapes, to concrete. It's pet and kid-friendly, yada, yada, yada. It's a great product. CMA, look for that if you are going to need to do some de-icing.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you guys joining us today. You can find us on Instagram. You can send us messages on there if you want at Horticulture Podcast. You can shoot us an email. That email will go to all of us, and we've got that in the show notes. And so be patient with us, but it does reach us, and we are happy to get to that. So if you've got show ideas and want to send them over or have general questions about something we've talked about, please feel free to reach out. Leave us a review if you are so inclined, so that the algorithm spreads our knowledge to the world. We appreciate that, but we're just glad to be here today. Thank you for the opportunity that we get together, and a couple of you listen, and we love that and appreciate you all. So anyways, we hope that as we grow this podcast, you will grow with us and that you'll join us next time. Have a great one.